I don't know if I've been this excited for a show in a long time. So every time I speak to the guest that I have today, I learn something new. He has transformed my life, brought him into 2 live events in my office now. One for my 8-figure entrepreneurs, my highest paying mastermind group. And then just recently for our Runway and Altitude members. And he has taught story and hero's journey. So if you guys ever heard of the hero's journey, you heard of me talking about it. If you heard about it and you listen to the show, you probably heard about it from me. What you might not know is there's somebody who taught it to me. And I listened to a presentation of his over and over and over again. And it's something that we've designed all of our programs around. Every story that I tell, the way that I talk, everything that we do is come from my guest today. So I'm really, really excited to sit down with him and talk to him and let him talk to you directly instead of through me. For the past few years, he's been, a lot of what I've done and what I've said to all of you that are listening have been influenced by my guest today. So I'm grateful to know him, grateful to call him a friend, and have been a mentor of mine for many years without ever knowing it, and now directly. So I want to introduce you to my guest today. His name is Michael Hauge. Michael, I'm so glad you're here.
Well, it's great to be here. I'm looking forward to it too. Always, always. Love it when we get together.
Me too. So maybe you can give the people that are listening a little introduction. So obviously I know you very well. Some of the people who are at our live events know who you are now and what you do. But for those who've never heard of you, can you just give a little background about you would be helpful?
Yeah. For now, more than 40 years, I've been working in the film business. It'll be, this will establish not just my status, but my age, but it was 50 years ago this next Labor Day that I moved to Hollywood, because I'd always dreamed of being in the movie business just because I love movies. I didn't know anything about the movies. I'd heard that there was a director thing. I knew that they must be written by somebody and so on. I just got on the turnip truck and went to LA because it was one of those things that it was a pipe dream. And finally, after teaching school for 3 years, I decided, it's time to basically, get off the pot and go down and give it a try. So I went there and knew nothing and found a little film school that was not graded, no credits, but you got to just pay for being with Hollywood masters of filmmaking in all arenas. So I got to hear Richard Dreyfuss talk. Eventually, I got to be an interviewer for that school after I'd been there a while, and I interviewed Clint Eastwood and Ron Howard and Jack Lemmon and Billy Wilder and so on. So that was my entree. And what I learned at the school that became sort of my hook in is learned how to be a reader. A story analyst is the official thing, but I learned how to read scripts and write synopses of them. And so I did that. I made about 50 cold phone calls, which is not like me, to find one job as a reader. And I found an agent who said, sure, come on in. I'll give you a script if I like because you're supposed to read the script and then write a synopsis of it and say, this is good or this is bad. So he said, come in and I'll have you do it. So I went in and he liked what I did. So he hired me. And the job paid $10 a script. And it took me about a day to read a script and write all my synopsis and notes. So I was immediately pulling down $10 a day in Hollywood, which I know made my dad really proud. He was very supportive, but I think he thought, you're going to go, I've been working as a teacher. I had a master's degree in education. You're going to go be in the movie business and make $10 a day. But that was it. And when I started reading those scripts, in fact, if I admit it, much of what we're going to talk about, much of what I've taught about and all that, I learned reading so many bad scripts and just saying to myself, what makes great movies work and these terrible scripts don't? And figuring out that gap, that sort of taught me what I needed to know, and eventually started teaching and then consulting with screenwriters and then directors and movie stars and so on, and eventually broadened it out to where I was, working with business leaders and internet marketers and public speakers and so on. Because one of the things I learned as well is story is story is story. If a movie works because of certain story principles, so will any story in any context. So that's what I've been doing. So I still work in Hollywood, and now I work with everybody else who's trying to persuade people to take action through stories. And just to drop names, you said you had seen a presentation I gave. What I know you watched was a video of a course that I did with another Hollywood consultant who's also an expert in sort of took Joseph Campbell's hero's journey and brought it to Hollywood with a memo he wrote. And so we'd gotten to be friends, and I said, let's do something together. So we did a lecture called The Hero's Two Journeys, because he talked about the hero's journey and I talked about what I call the inner journey. And one day I got a call from someone saying, my name is Tracy and I work with Will Smith. And I said, you mean Will Smith, Will Smith? And she said, yeah. And it turned out, I said, he wanted my help. He was working on a movie called I Am Legend, and he wanted my input on the script. And I said, great, I'd be happy to. How does he know even who I am? And Will had seen that same video that you saw, and that's why he called me and asked me to help. And that led to me being on retainer with his company for about 7 years and working with him on a number of movies. So all of that grew out of that starting point of just reading a lot of bad scripts, to be honest.
Well, it's good to know that me and Will Smith were watching the same thing at the same time. So it's, like minds must think alike.
Yeah.
So.
And your pal Russell Brunson. He called
That's
me,
right,
knowing who I was, saying when I talked to his. This was before he'd even thought about ClickFunnels. Maybe he'd thought about it, but he was doing something in Baltimore, and I thought, sure, I'd come there. Who doesn't want to go to Baltimore in the summer?
Yeah, so, that must have been like Dan Kennedy's group, Dan Kennedy and Bill Glazer's group or something, or one of his events, it sounds like.
No, it was Russell and a guy named Dagan Smith. I don't know if you ever met him.
Oh, yeah, Dagan, yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I in front of that group, there's probably about 50 or 60, but they were high-level internet marketers at that time. And I said, when I first talked to Russell, I said, I'd love to do this, but I don't really know what internet marketing is. Well, he said, we don't care. We just want you to talk about story. And so one of the things I said was, well, okay, I'll give my presentation and talk about the hero's two journeys and the inner journey and so on, and how you structure a story, et cetera. But what would be great is if I could coach you in front of the audience at some point. Let's hear a story you're working on. And Russell said, no. Russell's basically a shy guy who doesn't really like doing that, but Dagan was up for it. And you can go online and still see the coaching I gave Dagan about his story.
Yep, I've seen that. I've seen that recording. So, okay, work with Will Smith in Hollywood. Been doing it for a very long time. People might be thinking right now to me, like, why would Bill bring a guy from Hollywood on his real estate podcast? Well, what I've learned over the years is the framework that you teach of the inner journey and storytelling, obviously, is the most important thing that we can do. Everything is story. Like if you break it down, everything, it has a hero and a guide or the mirror or any of the different words that you can use for all of these folks. But if you can figure out how to help people and you can figure out the journey that they're going on and what's stopping them and all the problems and issues and things that they're having and what's holding them back and where they're feeling risky, and you can buy their house at a discount, you can sell the property to the right person, you can bring in an investor, you can do all these things. And a lot of what has to happen is you have to be able to tell a story or listen to somebody else's story too. I think what Michael's really, really good at is being able to pull things out of other people to design their story the right way to sell. So you were talking about, working with other business owners and things. So I think this is really important, not just for internet marketers, not just for movie stars or screenwriters or authors. This is really important for all of us. And if you can understand this, it's a little bit of a cheat code that you're going to have in your business. And so I wanted to bring them on and kind of break down some things. And where I'd like to focus, Michael, is on that inner journey piece. So I'm curious, I know, like, maybe you can explain the outer journey and inner journey quickly for them on this kind of hero's journey concept.
Sure. I mean, the division I sort of make is I see the hero's journey as basically a journey of accomplishment. It's like you want something and you take steps to get it, and you have to overcome obstacles to get there. And at the end of the day, you achieve that thing. So maybe it's flip a house. Let's just put it that way. You want to find a seller or find somebody who would. You persuade them, you put it on the market, you sell it. And though there are steps you have to take, and there's always obstacles that you have to overcome. The inner journey is sort of focusing on or realizing that usually the biggest obstacle you face in achieving a goal like that is you hold yourself back. It's the inner conflict that you have. It's that tug of war between your comfort zone and what you long for. And all of us have that because all of us went through, situations or wounds or traumas or just beliefs that we acquired, from childhood on oftentimes, or sometimes there was some traumatic thing and so on. And when we're wounded that way, when we have that kind of trauma, when some source of pain is so great that we sort of bury it, and we think we've healed it, we think we're past it, but we're not, then we create this sort of emotional armor, what I call our identity, that's going to prevent us from experiencing that pain. So let's say, now you could give me lots of examples because it's your world, but I would guess that one of the difficulties someone might have, because this is an issue that I've had, is, well, I would love to flip houses, but in the selling part of it, I don't feel comfortable asking for money. Okay, is that true? Is that something that sometimes people have a tough time doing?
Yeah, for sure. I would actually, it might be easier if a lot of the, like right now I'm doing a 5-day challenge on raising money. People are like, I would love to flip a house and use but I don't have a lot of money. I'd love to use somebody else's money to flip this house, but I'm not comfortable asking for money, just like you said. Like, I want to borrow money from somebody to flip the house, but I'm not comfortable asking for money.
Okay. And that discomfort very often is going to stem from some belief in the past. Like, people, like, if I ask, some people have a hard time asking for anything. And the idea is, well, if I ask you for something, then either I'm going to be in debt to you, or it'll put them on the spot, or they'll be embarrassed, or whatever it might be. So if you grew up saying, or just grew up with beliefs about money, that, money is not something you talk about, or money is the root of all evil, whatever it might be, you're not conscious of that necessarily unless you really dig in. But what happens is subconsciously we have this reaction, and then that fear is going to hold us back. So our comfort zone is sort of, one of the phrases that I like is, if you try to figure out what your inner conflict is, or anyone's inner conflict is, just how would they fill in the blank on this sentence? I'll do whatever it takes to achieve my goal, to achieve my dream, to flip a house or to win a marathon or whatever it might be. I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't ask me to blank, because that's just not me. And so those fill in the blank things are actually common and universal, because there are probably 100 obstacles you face externally when you're trying to go through the whole process of flipping a house. When it comes to those fears, those are they're deeper and they're more common. It's what I think Tony Robbins says, there's only really 2 fears. I'm not good enough and nobody will love me. And so if you're having trouble with money, probably one of your fears deep down is either if I ask for money, if that's the thing, or if I spend too much or whatever, people won't love me, or I'll screw it up. I'm not good enough. I don't know how to deal with money. And so that fear. So the inner journey is how a hero in a story needs to, or manages to, face and overcome that fear so they can achieve the goal that they're after. And in movie terms, the rule is pretty hard and fast, in Hollywood movies anyway, and that is, if the hero wants whatever it is, win true love, stop a serial killer, stop an alien invasion, make a certain amount of money, whatever. The rule is they can't achieve it in the movie unless they overcome that fear, that emotional armor they're wearing to avoid it. So
I think the same thing happens in real life. So as we talk about it, if you haven't noticed yet, you're the hero of your own journey, of your story, right? So you're going through life in your life. And if you want to flip a house, there's so many people that listen to this show, Michael, right now. They're listening to this show, and they've been listening to this show for years. This is probably episode number like 750 or 800 or 600.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of episodes that I've done and we've done here on the show. And we do like 2 a week. And so they've probably been listening for years and years and years. And they're like, okay, I'm going to do this. This is my year. And something's stopping them, or they do one and they're like, I want to leave my job, but I'm scared. And so all of this stuff that we're talking about, like you're the hero of the story, right? In the I'm going to flip a house story, you're the hero. And this conflict. So I remember, Michael, you defined a wound. So you mentioned the wound in there, an unhealed source of continuing pain. That was your exact quote from the presentation that you did. And I know it so well because I basically memorized the whole thing. So I've listened to it so many times, but an unhealed. So I keep coming back to that. I always have come back to that whenever I teach this or talk about it. An unhealed source of continuing pain. So it's a wound. It's something you went through, like you just said, that's still there. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I was flying for the military. So while I was getting trained as a Navy pilot, they would say this word, compartmentalize. Bill, you need to compartmentalize that. Mm-hmm. If you have a problem, compartmentalize it, push it down, put it in the box, lock the key, throw it away, because we can't have that when you're out flying a mission and we're deployed and you got some problems at home, or your girlfriend broke up with you, or you got financial issues, or whatever it is, whatever you're going through, compartmentalize it. And so for 20 years, I'm taught to compartmentalize this. And then I come into the business world and I'm just used to like pushing it down. Like, don't talk about it. Don't say anything. Just push it down and push it down. And I think so many of us are like that, especially even as a kid. I look at my kids now, and if they're upset or crying, I'm like, hey, stop that, or be quiet, or don't do that, or all of these things that we try to do to like not show weakness, right? And so what I've learned now, as after listening to like being trained by you effectively, right, is you have to go through this. You have to actually go through that and overcome it, because that wound creates the armor that you talked about that's designed to protect us, right? Which is one of my favorite things that you talk about. But the problem is we can't be who we were made to be, who God made us to be. And mm-hmm. So that challenge is everything that you're going through, like all the struggles, all the problems, all the pain, there's a reason for that. And so you actually have to process it and go through it and push past those wounds instead of push it away. So it's the opposite of how I kind of went through my military time, probably my upbringing, raised in the 80s and early 90s from baby boomers who were, kids of the Depression babies. So I eat everything that's on my plate and everybody else's plate, so I don't have to throw it away. I save my money. I'm very cheap and thrifty my whole life and things like that. So all of this stuff kind of has created who I was, and I've had to transform through that over time. So I think if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I want to flip a house, like this talk, like what we're talking about right now is the thing that's holding you back. So that sentence that Michael gave you, I'll do whatever it takes to achieve my goal, just don't ask me to blank, because that's just not me. That right there is a multi-million-dollar sentence. That is if every single business owner can find what's in that blank, if they can solve the blank, that's the game. That's the game right there. So mm-hmm. I just talked for a while, Michael. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yes, please don't talk so much on your own podcast, Bill. Jeez, I felt neglected over here. No, that's exactly right. But that's what I want you to do. First of all, I'll correct you on one thing. Doesn't have anything to do with when you grew up. Baby boomers, the only difference is starting with sort of the baby boomers, which I was, and from then on, we sort of became a little more aware of how this works, and what goes on. But whatever, whatever you're doing with your kids, there are going to be things that frighten them. You won't be a perfect parent, and sometimes you'll instill in them beliefs, and those beliefs about about the consequences of certain actions. So if you said repeatedly, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, pretty soon they're going to have the belief, well, being a cry, if you're a crybaby, that's weak. That's weak. I can't show weakness. And now it's not that they would forget. It's not that you're unconscious of it. You're aware. You just figure, oh, that was them. I've dealt with it. So now the process becomes, how do I do that? How, if I want to flip a house, I'm assuming all your listeners are saying, how do I deal with that fear? Well, this is where movies come in helpful. The first thing you have to do, though, is that step. The reason I like that sentence is, if you're aware of what the fear is, if you're aware of the thing that makes you so uncomfortable, you really aren't willing to do it. The reason I add the part, because that's just not me, is because the armored self, the identity we have, we think that's who we really are. It's not like, oh, I prefer not to ask someone to do something. I prefer not to ask for money. It's no, I don't ask for money. That's just not me. Because you think that's who you are. But if you recognize that, okay, I realize I'm just not willing to do this thing. So that's the first step. Then you have to ask yourself, okay, how much do you want to flip the house? Because, if it's something that fears you and the cost is, you can't eat ham anymore, whatever it might be, it's not going to be a big deal. But if you're listening to this and you want to be in house flipping, or you're doing that, you deeply want to achieve that goal. It's your destiny, or it's how you will live better, you think. So if you start focusing on what will it mean to me if I'm able to do that, then what happens is the desire for that pleasure exceeds the pain. That's the next thing. Next thing you need to do, though, is you need to find what I call reflection. You need to be with other people. This is how you function, Bill, with all your followers, because you're the one who is going to come along. Think of Robin Williams in Good Will Hunting, or Donkey in Shrek, or anybody who's the sidekick who basically says, what are you doing, Bill? This isn't you. Why are you? They help you achieve your goal, but one of the ways they help you is to point out, this isn't you. You're just holding back. If you can take the risk of trying to do these steps you don't do, then you have a chance. And then the last thing is, you don't try and take everything on. You take the next step toward doing that thing you don't want to do. So rehearse asking for money or whatever. I don't know the process that you would know, but you've got to give yourself some experience of what you need to learn to do. And the more you do it, the less the pain will overcome you. And the more you'll realize, yeah, I can do this, and your courage will build. And then you can cross the finish line like the hero of a movie would do. Does that make sense? Or
yeah, absolutely. You mentioned like the guide or the mirror, like this other character. Is this why like mentorship and coaching and things like that are so valuable? It's like that person to kind of point out those things, or a little bit further ahead of you in that area. Like, can you give me maybe like, who is that person? How do you find it? That kind of thing.
Well, yeah, a coach or a trainer or someone like that whose job is a guide. Like, we're both consultants. Like, we're both in the business of helping other people achieve their goal. Mine is help people tell better stories. And so one of the things is, as I start working with storytellers, I might encounter let's say it's a public speaker and they're terrified of getting on stage, if we can get to, well, where does that come from? What is it you really think is going to happen? Then that would be helpful. But it's not just that. You could find a friend. You could find anyone who's, all they have to be is someone who cares enough about you to tell you the truth. Because someone in your audience could go to a friend who doesn't know anything about flipping, but you could say to them, look, I'm terrified of X. So can you point out to me when that's it? Or can I share that with you? And then if they'll point out to you, this is when you're holding yourself back, like Donkey does in Shrek or whatever, then that will encourage you to, to be more courageous. And and it takes the time of going through the process. That's why what that's known as is a character's arc. It's really the transformation that takes place over the course of the story from living in fear to living courageously, to living in your identity, that emotional armor, to living your essence, which is your truth. Like you said, what we're here to do, what is our own personal destiny.
I love that. There's some times where I hear from people, it's like, oh, you know what? Like, I don't know, that mentor didn't really work for me, or that coach wasn't the best for me. And there's something that you said in there that I think really stands out from great coaches that I've had in the past. And it's, they care so much about you that they're willing to tell you the truth. So I hope you didn't miss that if you're listening. That coach or person or friend or family member or something, that they care enough about you that they're willing to actually hold up the mirror that shows the actual reflection, not like the social media reflection. Yeah. A lot of people will tell you what they want you to hear, or what you want to hear, I should say. They'll tell you what you want to hear versus tell you what's actually going on. And I think the best coach, when I think of it, the best coaches that I've ever had and the best mentors and people like that, they've really pushed me to be a better version of me. They've really pulled out they've said that that's not you, like you said. They've really kind of, and when it wasn't easy to do, sometimes it was hard to tell the truth. It was hard to hold up the actual mirror. Mm-hmm. It would have been easy to say, oh, just keep going, you'll be fine. But to really call you out, and they have to really care about you. And I think that's what you need to look for in somebody. If you're out searching for a mentor or searching for a coach or searching for a guide, it's the people that really care about you, and they care about their people and the good character and values, and they align with you. So I think it's a great point.
When I would coach screenwriters, and I've been doing this for decades now, when they'd finish the script, my motto was sort of show it to your mom first. Because your mom is going to think this is going to be the greatest movie ever written, because your mom, that's not her job really to be that kind of reflection. Usually it's like to support you and say, this is wonderful, wonderful. And I say, then find a coach, then find a consultant, or join a writer's group, but a writer's group where they're courageous enough to say, this is not it. I mean, there's a sort of a built-in beauty to being a consultant and have someone pay you to do that, because you're not doing your job if you're not going to be honest. I one time I said that to Will, because I was always sort of awestruck whenever we get together. At the time he was the biggest movie star in the world, and I said to him once, it's pretty cool that we could all get together and I could tell you the truth about whatever idea you have, even if it's no good. And if he said, if you won't do that, then you don't belong here. And he wasn't really smart. It's like, that's your job.
Yeah. And I think it's tough for some people. I agree. When you have like a duty, and we shouldn't, it's hard. Like if you're not getting paid and it's a friend, it's hard to tell them how it really is, because you don't know how the reaction is going to be. In a coach student or paid position to mentor mentee, it's a lot easier because that's what you're there for, and sometimes and it's in an area where you're further along, like very easy for me to jump in and start talking about, raising money and stuff, because I'm way further along than most. And so that's a lot of the coaching that I'm doing right now. And inside of that, it's very easy for me to find the little thing. It's just you say something and it's just like, no. Like even when you said like ask for money, I don't ask anybody for money. I have an opportunity. This is an opportunity for them to invest with me. So they invest with me. They should be chasing me, not me chasing them. So it's a total. But people that come to me, they're like, I have a problem asking people for money. And I say, well, if you're asking somebody for money, what do you have to do? What do they have to do? They have to give it to you. And if somebody gives you money, do you expect it back? No. The people that are asking for money are the side of the road with a sign in where you live, Michael, in California, all over the place, right? And they're like, give me some money. Like, give me money. You're not like rolling back there a week later to get it back with interest. And so, in real estate, we don't ask anybody for money. Hey, invest with me. This is an opportunity for you. I'm the opportunity. I can do things that you can't. So it's a big shift for some people.
It's a big shift. You've changed your language, but either that was not one of your experiences, one of your issues, or if it was, it's great that you changed and said, well, I'm giving them an opportunity. But what that really represents is somehow you acquired that because you could let go of the fear and the belief that was attached to doing it. Because, I've heard that too, because I still struggle with that. It's still like, well, if you're like back of the room sales, when I do see that, well, you're getting an opportunity and so on and so on. And that's tough. It was always tough for me because I had this sort of dual views about money. My father was very frugal and my mother said, you should spend it while you've got it. And it was, that was, I mean, when I say it's a wound, all I mean is it created a belief that was a source of pain. But I want to jump into one other thing because as real estate, if you're in real estate, it's important to recognize that in yourself. But there's another real value to knowing this inner journey stuff. And that is if you're persuading somebody or coaching somebody or whatever it might be, if you're trying to get somebody to, invest in your project or sell their house or buy your house or whatever it might be, then a story can become very valuable because if let's say you want to persuade somebody to sell you their house so you can flip it. I may be simplifying this too much, but that's one of the players, right? Okay. Yep. But if you know, you got to know going in that for, the vast majority of people, their home is like, next to food, shelter is like the thing. And there's a real attachment to it. And to give up your home or to be afraid that, oh, what if I'm just screwing up? What if you're not honest? Or what if I'm not selling it for enough? Or all those things. Okay, so you could try talking them out of that fear. And that might work, but not really much because that's head work, and fear is body work, really. But if you tell a story about someone else who had the same fear at the beginning, but worked with you, and at the other end of it realized that, yes, it was hard to let go of their home, but they came out with money. They didn't have to go through foreclosure, and they actually ended up finding another house that was more within their means or whatever the story is about. Because telling a story about it, they're recognizing the fear in the hero of your story, but you're not saying to the listener, I know you're afraid, because that's kind of confrontive and it's not really what we want to be reminded of. But in a story, we empathize with, we identify with the hero. And the way stories work is, as you hear the story, if you're hearing the story or reading the story, then you become the hero subconsciously. And that means you're going through the fear that the hero had, but you're not really, in a way. So, and at the other end of your story, that character finds the courage to do what you're trying to persuade him to do and wins at the other end. So you've actually subconsciously given them the emotional experience are already working with you, already doing what you're trying to persuade them to do, and already having overcome the fear that that character had. And and subconsciously, you're instilling some degree of courage in them because they've already been courageous through the character. Does that make sense? I mean,
Yeah. No, absolutely makes sense. And I can think of multiple stories that I've built out like this. And so if, you're listening as a real estate investor, again, we're talking about movies and stories and books and things, but I have a story about how I lost $70,000 on a flip, and my lenders never even knew that I lost money because they got paid in full. And I use this story all the time that I built out using Michael's framework to tell that to a potential lender who I'm not going to say your money's guaranteed. I'm not going to say it's safe. All the things that I'm not allowed to say, and I don't say, but I tell that story instead of saying, hey, you can trust me. Because the other option is, just like you said, Michael, is, oh, trust me, I'll make sure you get paid back. Like, okay, I don't know that I can trust you, or I can tell a story about the house in Pensacola that I think some things didn't go right. I ended up losing $70,000. And at that time I had two choices. The first choice is I can call my investors and say, hey, I can get your principal back, but all that interest I promised you, we lost money on the house and I just can't pay the interest. I got to pay you back in principal, just your principal and not all the money that we had on the note. Or the second option is I can do what I said I was going to do and pay them every single penny of interest that they were owed, even though it meant a $50,000 wire out to my investors when I lost $70,000 on the house. So I could have lost 20 and not pay them interest, or I could lose 70. And sure enough, I sent all the money back to them, and they never even knew that I lost money on the house because we didn't have that conversation that I could have had until I wrote my book. When I wrote my book, I told the story in there, and my investor called me up and said, hey, was that the house that I invested in when he read the book? And I said, yeah, it was. And he said, why didn't you call me? And I would have taken less. I said, I know you would have taken less, but you wouldn't have funded my next 4 deals. And so when I can tell a story like that, a potential investor going forward, what they hear is, wow, Bill's going to pay me his money back, even if it means him losing money. And I don't have to say any of those things. So that's an investor story. I have dozens of stories for people that we've bought houses from at 50 cents on the dollar because they were getting a divorce, because they inherited it, because they were tired landlords, going through probate. So many of these stories that I can pull from and frame and tell somebody who I'm in their house, you know what? There was somebody just like you that we worked with 2 years ago. Her name was Mary. And then I can go into it. And this is what happened. And now Mary's doing X, Y, and Z. And they can immediately put themselves there and calm themselves down. Same thing with buyers. I can talk to other flippers and other landlords. I have stories about houses we've wholesaled to different people. And this is why I'm bringing Michael here. The reason why my company probably does more deals than your company does, if you're listening to this, the reason why I might raise more money than you, it's because stories build trust. It's because stories get people to move, stories get people to decide. And I live my life, and speaking from stage, people are like, man, you've gotten a lot better than 2019 when you were horrible on stage. I said, well, I found a guy that can help me tell better stories in my presentation.
Those are your reflection characters. You were terrible back then. At least they're post-reflection. After the fact, they became reflection. Sorry, I didn't mean
That's
to.
Right. No, so all of these things, if you're listening to the show, all this stuff can help you, and it can really help build your business, and it's built mine. My entire business, all my businesses are really built through story, and this is the secret weapon. Like Michael's framework, the structure of storytelling, and you can and story selling, really, right? It's because of that framework, and so we're going to be doing a webinar coming up. And really not a webinar. It's kind of more, just jumping on a Zoom call. And I was able to convince Michael to jump on a Zoom call with me and all of you, where we can present the framework of story and show you how to build it out, like, a couple of the steps of what's important in a really good story. And I'll be working with him on that and just kind of like talking through it a lot like this, but you'll be in the Zoom with us. And then at the end, we'll be able to take some Q&A from you guys. Like, hey, I've got this, I've got this, I've got that. So would love to invite you to that. It's going to be next week. Okay, next week, the link is going to be in the description of this podcast. We're going to send out some emails. If you're not on our email, you can just send an email, not on our email list, send an email to info@sevenfigureflipping.com, the number 7figureflipping.com, and we'll make sure that you get on the email list and you get it. But it's in the description of the show notes here. You can just click on that link, register for the call that we're going to do, and then we're going to email it out. Michael, I wanted to make sure, I know we don't have a lot of time on this, but I want to make sure we invited them to that because like, I think like what you just said was so powerful. It's like being able to design that story such that you can get somebody to have an emotional tie through their heart is business like that. And you realizing that this is for entrepreneurs and this is for business owners, really, really powerful. And I think, my business has made a lot of money because of it. And honestly, not even that, like the money comes as a byproduct of helping people. And we're in the business of helping people. And when you said persuade multiple times, a lot of people are like, I'm going to convince somebody to do something. I feel like convincing somebody to do something is getting them to do something they don't necessarily want to do, where persuasion is getting them to do something that they've already decided to do, just getting them to do it faster and with the right person. And so the art of persuasion is really through story, like you talked about. And that's people I go see in the home, like we just want to help them somehow. And then usually there's money as the byproduct of that and profit. So I'm really excited about this call. And I don't know, is there anything that you wanted to say before we kind of wrap things up?
No, I'm sorry. I was thinking about the thing. I was thinking that if you see it that way, you're going into someone's home and you're trying to persuade them to do something like they've already decided to do, something that's, I'll talk about Will Smith again, because he and I was on retainer with him, and the two of us were invited to be on a online interview together. So we got interviewed together, and the moderator, the first thing she asked was, well, Will, tell us, why do you think story is so important? And his answer was, because stories help us live better. Everybody wants their life to be better, and stories are giving us how we can do that, how we can live better. And so if you're going into someone's home and you're trying to persuade them to do that, and you recognize that underneath, maybe even underneath the verbiage, what they're saying about it, that there's this underlying fear, then you become like their reflection. Because a reflection character is a character who on the honor journey level is helping that character achieve their goal. That's what you're trying to do. You're helping them, and it'll pay back to you too, because you've helped them, and that's sort of the exchange. But the reflection also holds their feet to the fire and says, wait a minute, now it's your fear talking. Now, again, as I said, you don't want to go in and say, well, I know you're afraid, I know you're afraid, I know you're afraid. But if you tell a story and say, someone like you, and you include in that, I knew someone just like you who became successful by doing what we're asking you to do. But you tap into what that person was afraid of. So you're bringing fear into the conversation through that character. That's when you're going much deeper. And when you go that deep with the story, that's when it becomes most persuasive. That's when you can instill courage in the person you're talking to. So I guess I did have something else I wanted to say.
I love it. I would say, yeah, I'm totally with you. The fact is, you have the opportunity in real estate to change many, many people's lives, to really change their lives and really help them. When I look back at the 1,000 houses that we bought, plus, I don't know, we're over 1,000 for sure by now, maybe 1,100 or so. When I look back, I remember people very early on when I was in the home, a woman who had cancer and so did her daughter, and they didn't have very long to live and they just wanted to be together. I had another family who was moving to be with a young child, their grandchild, who was in North Carolina, who was really sick. and they just needed to move right away. I had another family member another person that we bought a house from, who just could not stand the neighbors. They just couldn't deal with the neighbors. It was so horrible. They just had to get out of there. I didn't want anybody to know they were selling their house. And it's just like getting to the bottom of everything that's going on and figuring out how you can help. So many of these stories that I have of the people that I met and their life, and being able to work through something with them, and getting better at this is a real skill that's going to help you. So that's why I wanted to put this on. That's why I wanted to do something with Michael, and him being willing to come on the podcast and also do a call, like a Zoom call. I mean, who doesn't want to come on and hang out with somebody who's hung out with Will Smith? You're like 1 degree of separation from Will Smith at that time. That's pretty cool. I mean, I tell all my friends that I know this guy named Will Smith and then this other guy named Michael who worked with him. So I probably can't say that, but I know Michael. So yeah, I want to invite you guys to come on and jump on the Zoom call with us. We'll put it in the show notes. We'll put it in the email and everything like that. And that's the to-do from this. I want you guys to all go there. If this resonated with you, if you believe in this concept and getting better at story so that you can sell better, you can bring more people in, you can bring in more revenue in the business, I'm confident that this will help you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have brought him on. And so we'll drop the link in the email and the show notes. And then hopefully next week, we'll see you all there. And if you're listening to this after February 26th, the call will be on February 26th. We still have it. We have the recording and we can send it to you. So just email us in info@sevenfigureflipping.com. And if you're like, I want to watch this, we'll have the recording. We can send it to you. Okay. So, Michael,
one of the things I'm excited. Oh, sorry. One of the things I'm excited about doing is because we sort of promised each other we're going to allow time for Q&A. And I love Q&A because I consult with people on their stories, but I love because I don't know house flipping, much at all. You do. But when you hear specific questions about a situation where you're wondering, how do I use this story, or why would I even want to here, and so on, so we can zero in on something specific, that's when it's easiest to explain, well, this is how it works generally. I love doing that because then it's just right on point, the kinds of situations that you'd be in. So I love Q&A stuff.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And we're going to give you some tactical ways to build out, like Michael's framework. He's going to share his framework to build out a really good story and make it easy for you so you can do it over and over and over again. Again, I'm really big on skills. When you learn skills, you can replicate them over and over and over again. So you learn this skill, it's something that you can reproduce for the rest of your life. And maybe you need your kids to go to bed on time. Maybe you want your wife to be nicer to you. Maybe you want something, like whatever you want in life, it's all revolves around a good story and getting the heart to move. So, I can see
the kids next door. They behave a lot better than you guys do. I'm going to tell you a story about them.
That's right. It's all, I think any outcome that you want is on the other side of a really good story. Yeah. So, and getting them to decide and move and do something and get emotional attachment. So Michael, thank you so much for being with us. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to next week and yeah, I can't wait for this. Like I'm pumped. I think our people are going to love it. And I'm really grateful that you came on and shared everything that you, that you have.
As I said, it's always fun. Of course, I love talking about story, but it's fun when you and I get to talk to each other,
Yeah, for sure. All right, everyone. We will see you on the Zoom call that we're doing next week. It will be in the show notes, in the email. Don't miss it. You can post about it. You can ask us on social. You can ask us via email. If you're like, where's the link? We'll get it to you. Okay. I'm really excited about that. And to be able to pick some people to do some Q&A and share some of that stuff. I'm excited. Michael, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
I know that people got a ton out of this.
Seeing all of you there.
Me too. All right. I will see you on the next show. Thanks for being here. Bye.